Alan Watts often reminded us that if you truly wish to understand a person's nature, you must not be misled by appearances, achievements, or the polished identities they project to the world. He observed that the most telling signs of character appear not in what a person carefully chooses to display, but in what slips through when they are unguarded. Beneath the cultivated persona, beneath the cultivated smile, beneath the rehearsed gestures and respectable achievements, there are two particular revelations that quietly but consistently expose the truth of who someone really is. And the irony is that most people reveal these things without any awareness that they are doing so. Picture yourself sitting across the table from a friend, a partner, or a colleague you thought you understood. They look the part, composed, reliable, trustworthy, the kind of person you would stake your confidence on. Yet something in their presence disturbs you. It is not obvious. They have done nothing overtly dishonest or offensive. But your intuition whispers that there is more beneath the surface, something unspoken and unresolved. This dissonance between the surface impression and the deeper resonance is precisely the territory that fascinated Watts. He often spoke of the masks we all wear. These masks, or what he called the roles of life, are necessary for navigating society. We cannot walk into the world completely unfiltered, showing every impulse, every insecurity, every desire. We create masks, identities, to function smoothly. But as Watts pointed out, the trouble begins when we mistake the mask for the real face, or when we become so attached to the mask that we cannot let it slip. And yet, no matter how hard someone clings to that image, there are always two windows through which their true character becomes visible. Once you learn to see these windows clearly, you no longer mistake the mask for the whole person. These are not complex psychological techniques. They require no elaborate analysis or professional training. They are simple observations, but simple does not mean shallow. Simple in Watts' sense means direct, uncluttered, elemental. They are the direct routes into understanding, both of others and of yourself. And therein lies the unsettling truth. These observations do not only expose other people's inner world, they expose your own. Watts often reflected that the most frightening thing in life is not discovering the secrets of the cosmos, but facing yourself without distortion. To fully accept one's own being, shadow and all, is the hardest work a human being can undertake. And these two character reveals inevitably force us into precisely that confrontation. The first reveal, which we might call the shadow projection, is seen in the way people judge others. Watts suggested that what we criticize most fiercely in others is often what we are unconsciously struggling with within ourselves. If you want to know someone's unresolved inner conflicts, listen not to their polite affirmations, but to their harsh condemnations. Judgments are mirrors. When someone is filled with irritation or hostility toward a particular trait in others, you are witnessing them wrestling with that very quality in their own psyche. Consider an example. Emma, a teacher who prides herself on discipline and order, constantly rails against her students for being lazy and unfocused. She speaks of their failures with a bitterness that goes far beyond professional concern. Watts would say that Emma's intensity is not truly about the students. It is about her own relationship with laziness, her own fear of being unproductive, or her own unacknowledged longing to let go. Perhaps she suppresses a deep desire for rest, spontaneity, or even play, but because she has disowned that part of herself, she attacks it when she sees it reflected in others. Her judgment of her students is a projection of her own buried conflict. Or take another example. Michael, who always denounces others for being arrogant. He cannot stand boastful colleagues, despises celebrities who seek attention, mocks anyone who shows pride. Yet in his relentless critique, Watts would ask us to notice what Michael is hiding. Perhaps it is his own longing to shine, his own hunger to be recognized, his own potential for confidence that he has locked away out of fear. His judgments are not objective moral insights. They are projections of his denied self. Watts emphasized that projection is not always negative. We project not only our disowned flaws, but also our disowned brilliance. Someone who constantly places others on pedestals, calling them wonderfully creative or marvelously free, may be revealing the creativity and freedom within themselves that they have not yet dared to claim. The sign is always intensity, strong emotional reactions, whether of admiration or condemnation, are signs that the shadow is speaking. And if you are honest, you will notice this if these reflections are offering you a moment of clarity or calm, I warmly invite you to support Listening Mind by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Each gesture of support helps us continue creating meaningful content and allows this community of thoughtful listeners to grow. Yourself. Think of a time when you judged someone harshly, only to realize later that your criticism said more about you than about them. Perhaps you scorned someone for being needy, only to recognize that you too have needs you are ashamed to voice. Perhaps you condemn someone's vanity, only to catch yourself craving recognition. Every judgment is an arrow pointing back at the self. The second character reveal Watts pointed to comes not through projection, but through the collapse of the mask. He often remarked that people spend a staggering amount of energy maintaining an image of themselves. They imagine who they're supposed to be: successful, serene, unshakable, clever, and then labor constantly to sustain that role. But under pressure, when that image is challenged, when criticism comes, when failure looms, the mask falters, and in that instant, their true character emerges. Imagine you are at a dinner party, and someone who is usually charming and gracious is suddenly criticized for a mistake. Watch closely. Do they laugh it off with humility, or do they lash out defensively? Do they deflect blame, or do they respond with sincerity? In that fragile moment, when their identity is threatened, you see who they truly are. Take Rachel, a calm and polished lawyer who prides herself on composure. One afternoon in court, a judge sharply questions her preparation. In an instant, Rachel's mask of calm cracks. She becomes defensive, interrupts the judge, throws blame toward her assistants. The polished lawyer disappears, and the insecure, panicked person beneath steps forward. Watts would say that this moment reveals her character far more than years of professional presentation. It shows her default reaction when the mask cannot hold. And these cracks happen not only in dramatic settings, they happen in the small irritations of daily life. When someone's internet connection fails and they lose their temper. When their flight is delayed and their voice turns sharp with airline staff. When a waiter forgets their order and they erupt with condescension. These tiny breaks are far more revealing than their cultivated charm. The most integrated people, Watts observed, are those whose inner being and outer mask are not in conflict. Their reactions under pressure are aligned with the persona they present because they have done the work of self-acceptance. They are not maintaining a fragile mask. They are simply living as themselves. Now, when you combine these two reveals, the projections that show what someone cannot accept in themselves and the breakdowns that show who they are under pressure, you encounter a third test, the integration moment. This is when someone is gently confronted with their own shadow. Do they grow defensive, or do they acknowledge what is being revealed? Return to David, the architect furious with Marcus for being fake. Suppose a colleague gently asks him, David, do you ever wish you could be more socially skilled, like Marcus? If David snaps back angrily, denying it, insisting he is authentic while Marcus is manipulative, you see a man trapped in his projection, unable to reflect. But if David pauses and admits, yes, perhaps I do wish I were more socially fluid. Perhaps my irritation comes from something I secretly long for. Then you see a man capable of growth. The difference between the defensive and the integrative response is the difference between unconscious living and conscious living. Watts insisted that the purpose of seeing these reveals is not to feel superior to others, but to awaken to the fact that every person is a mirror. Each person you meet is showing you something about yourself. Those who irritate you most are your teachers because they reveal your shadow. Those who trigger your defensiveness show you where your mask is fragile. Those who inspire you reveal potentials within yourself that are waiting to be lived. He warned, however, that this knowledge can become dangerous if misused. Some people turn into what he called shadow hunters, using psychological insight as a weapon to attack others, to manipulate, or to inflate their own egos. This, he said, is a distortion of the true purpose. Real character reading should lead to compassion, not superiority. If your insight makes you more judgmental rather than more compassionate, you are misusing it. Instead, use these observations to deepen connection. In a relationship, when your partner complains bitterly about someone else, listen carefully. They may be revealing their own struggles. You can use this as a doorway to intimacy. Gently reflect. It sounds like that person's neediness really bothers you. Do you ever feel like you can't express your own needs? Such conversations turn judgments into openings for deeper understanding. At work, observe how colleagues react when their ideas are criticized. Some will attack, others will withdraw, and some will pause and reflect. These patterns show you their capacity for leadership and collaboration. In parenting, notice what your children complain about in their friends. Instead of dismissing it, ask what their judgments reveal about their own insecurities. Every irritation becomes an invitation to self-awareness. Watts encouraged practical exercises to cultivate this awareness. Keep a journal, he suggested, of the moments when someone irritates you. Write down precisely what bothered you, then ask, where is this trait in me? What am I afraid of about this quality? And when you feel defensive at criticism, pause before replying. Ask yourself, what if there's truth here? What if this reaction is showing me my own mask? In this way, life itself becomes your teacher. The path is not comfortable. Watts often said there is no awakening without discomfort, because to see yourself clearly means facing parts of yourself you would rather avoid. But the pain of awareness is not the pain of destruction. It is the pain of birth. Through this process, you move from unconscious projection to conscious integration. In the beginning, you will spot projections in others, but remain blind to your own. Then you will recognize your own patterns intellectually, even while you are still caught emotionally. Gradually, you learn to catch yourself in real time, to pause and to choose differently. Eventually, you respond to others' unconscious patterns with compassion rather than defensiveness. And at the highest stage, you embody what Watts described as the ability to hold paradox, to accept light and dark, strength and weakness, mask and shadow, as part of one flowing wholeness. This awareness ripples outward. When you no longer fuel projections or defend masks, you create a new space in your relationships. People sense it. They may feel you are calmer, more real, less reactive. Some will resist, intensifying their defenses. But others will soften, drawn toward the authenticity you embody. Consciousness spreads not through preaching, but through presence. Watts believed that every individual who awakens in this way contributes to the awakening of the whole. The world will try to tell you who you are, but if you know yourself, shadow included, you no longer need to accept its definitions. You become a point of light for others, a reminder that authenticity is possible. And so these two reveals, shadow projection and mass breakdown, are not just tools for understanding others. They are mirrors for understanding yourself. Every harsh judgment is a map of your shadow. Every defensive reaction is a clue to your mask. Every moment of awareness is a step toward integration. Watts reminded us that our task is not to become perfect, but to become conscious. Perfection is an illusion, another mask. Consciousness is the willingness to see yourself honestly and live authentically. And in that authenticity, you contribute not only to your own liberation, but to the liberation of those around you. So the invitation is simple, though never easy. Watch the judgments, notice the cracks, reflect with honesty, and above all, turn that same clear gaze inward. Because the character you are truly discovering in all of this is your own. Thank you sincerely for sharing your time with Listening Mind. Your presence here means more than you can imagine. If today's video has brought you value, a subscription and a like are a wonderful way to help us continue on this journey of reflection and empathy together. From the heart, thank you for being part of this space.